Hello, my name is Andrew and I am one of the New Zealand Microsoft student partners. Today I'll be taking you through a short tutorial on how to implement the Context API in an application. The application I will be using is called dankNotDank, which you will be familiar with if you came along to the MSA workshops or have followed along with the other YouTube tutorials. So before we jump into the implementation, let's briefly look at what the Context API does and what problems it is solving for us. According to the React documents, Context provides a way to pass data through the component tree without having to pass props down manually at every level. So what does this mean? Normally, when we have some data in a component high in the React component tree, and we want to access it from a component at the very bottom of the component tree, we have to pass it down explicitly. This process of passing down data explicitly is sometimes referred to as prop drilling or threading. Prop drilling can involve passing data through dozens of components, most of which do not need to access the data at all. The Context API is able to eliminate this tedious and cumbersome process by making the data available to all components in the tree without requiring us to pass them down manually. So hopefully we have already ticked off the introduce state management and introduced the React Context API of the objectives of this session, but the main focus of this is how to implement the Context API. So I will now bring up the GitHub. So this is the New Zealand MSA GitHub. If you haven't been following along with these tutorials, feel free to navigate to this now. So my section is the state management and context. So if we click in this folder here, you can see a full documentation on everything that I'm going to be talking through today. So the very first part of it is an introduction with background, what the problem is and the solution, which I just very quickly went through. But the bulk of this tutorial is going to be walking through how we can implement context into the application that we've been building through the YouTube videos or the MSA workshop. So if you get stuck or you want further in-depth look at what we've been doing, feel free to jump on this documentation. I'm going to be using this for the basis of this walkthrough. And also, if you get stuck at all, or maybe I've screwed up along the way somehow, which hopefully I haven't, the full project is available here. So you can download this and you can have a look at my source code and everything. So what we might actually do to begin with is we might actually show you the end product of what we're going to be building. So I'm just going to open a PowerShell window here, and I believe I've got everything installed, but let's just run npm I to make sure we've installed all the dependencies. Awesome. So there's a few warnings there, but I don't believe they're going to impact the application. So now we're going to run the React app to see what hopefully we will get in the end product. Okay, awesome. So this is the end application that we're hoping for. You'll notice that obviously, so the idea is that we're going to be implementing a theme across the web page. You'll notice that the theme is only applied to the body because this is a very simple tutorial. So you can build upon this right across the entire website to make sure that everything implements it, but I'm just showing you the bare bones. So if we click this button here, you'll see that we've got a dark theme and a light theme. So yeah, we're going to be implementing that. So if we now head here, so what I'm going to be building upon is the UI portion. So we're going to take the UI project and we're going to build upon this. So we'll just copy and paste that into a new folder. I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. That's my preferred editor. Open up PowerShell. So now I've got a terminal here, so we're going to have to install the dependencies. because I have not done this on this project yet, so that might take a bit of time. But I'll go while that's installing, I'll go further into what the context API is. So it is made up of three major excuse me. It's made up of three major three main parts. First is the React.create context, which creates an object that contains a provider and a consumer. So the provider is a component that is used is used high in the component tree, and it accepts a value prop and can share data with multiple descendant consumers. So then we have the consumer, which is a React component that subscribes to context changes. So this is lower down in the component tree from the provider. So if we reach up the component tree to the provider and we grab the data from the provider, if there is no provider, then the consumer uses the default value that was passed to the create context. Okay, so you might have noticed that I skipped a bit there while waiting for that to install, because it took way longer than I anticipated. But anyway, so now we're going to just run the server, because might as well have that going in the background while we carry on and head over to the tutorial. So as I said, I'm going to be using this as my guide going through this tutorial. If we go back here, there we go. So before we start, I believe I covered all that. So first we're going to create a file called theme-context.tsx. So that's going to be in the source folder. So we'll go new file, theme-context-tsx. Boom. Okay, we got that sorted there. And I'm just going to copy and paste the code, but basically what this code is doing is we're defining different stylings for our themes. So as I said, we're going to have a light theme and a dark theme, and so we're just defining what the foreground color will be and the background color will be for those different themes. And next we're going to have the context object. So I said one of the three main parts was the React.create context. And so that is that there. And so this basically creates the context, an object that contains provider and consumer, which are both React components that we will be using later. I see that it is giving us errors, which means I've forgotten an import statement. So we need to import React. It's not that. React start as React. Yeah, no, you just go React from React. And there we go, error's gone. Sweet. Oh, are we already running something? Oh, we are too. Sorry, let me just terminate this. Terminate that. And I'm going to restart that. I apologize for that. So I left the previous previous project running, so the completed project, I left that running for a bit and forgot about it. So when I tried to run it again, it tried using the same port number and realized that that was already taken. So just restarting that server, but don't worry about that. Hopefully you hopefully you are doing better than me at this point. Okay, so what we've done is we've added the themes styling, we've defined our theme styling, we've defined a React context object. So now in the app.tsx folder we need to change the constructor so that it includes the theme and a method called toggle theme. So we're going to go over here, going to open this up, and so we just need to add to this dot state, and we're just going to add theme themes dot dark. Oh, sorry. And the other one was toggle theme, and we're going to define that as this dot toggle theme. Now, rightfully so, we have a bunch of errors, and I don't believe that this is going to compile. So there are several reasons for these errors, and so let's go through and start fixing them now. So the first reason for the error is we've defined an interface for all the variables that should be stored in state, and we've just gone ahead and added some variables without defining them in the interface, and so that is a no-no. So what we need to do is go up here in the interface and define theme and just state it as it can be anything, and same with toggle theme. Need to define that, and yet again, even though it's a function, we can just define that as anything. Next, we have to import themes. So we've started using the themes .dark. So we've tried referencing this styling that's in this file here, but because it's in a different file, we need to import it into app.tsx. So we just add an import statement, and we'll just call that themes. We go from, and it's going to be /theme context. And awesome, so most of our errors have gone now. We've just got one more error, and that is this .toggle theme, and that's because we haven't defined a method called toggle theme. So it's looking for the method toggle theme, but it doesn't exist. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that method. So this method is basically making it so that if the method runs, it will go through, it will check the current theme, and it will change it over to the other theme in the state. So see this .state, set state, and then we change the state depending on whether it's light or dark. And yep, so that's what that's doing there. So now if we compile this, hopefully, awesome, we've got compiled successfully. However, we haven't changed anything in our UI yet. So it looks the same because we've only been adding logic. We haven't touched anything with the UI yet, which I believe we're going to start doing now. So now it's time to start using our themes. So we need to add theme context to the import statement because we're going to start using that in a second, and just to avoid errors early, although this will throw an error as well, defining this, we're going to add theme context in this import statement, and you'll see here it's actually started throwing errors because we've imported something that we're not using, and TypeScript is not a fan of that, but never fear, we are going to be using it soon. There we go. So next we're going to be going here. Okay. So I need to update this README, and I will update the README, but you'll see that this new render method is actually out of date. So what we've done is we've actually put the theme.consumer inside the div class name equals container fluid. So we've now changed that so that it's now inside that. That probably makes no sense because I'm trying to point at the screen, but I will go through, and so if you just follow along with what I'm typing here, you should be okay. So see, instead of defining it above the div class name equals container fluid, we're defining it inside that. Now the consumer requires a little bit of code, so we need the curly brace theme, spell theme correctly, and open parentheses. Okay, sweet, and then we go to the end of the div, so we want the end of this div here, so we want to put it here and encapsulate that there. And finally we put our closing end tag there, just for consistency's sake, because it will drive me mad, I'm going to move all of that up a notch so that it is line, so that that's in line. Okay, so we've done this part now. So we've added theme context, however we're not referencing it yet. So yet again, if we go back to the UI, nothing's changed. So what we need to do now is, now I'm going to go here and I'm going to add some styling to this. So the styling I'm going to do, I believe, I'm just double checking. Yep, so we're going to go through and we're going to change the background color and the foreground color. So background color and color. So background color, and we're going to change this to whatever the theme defines it as. So we want background, and oh wait, no, we want color here, theme, foreground. So color generally sets the text and generally the color of things that are in the foreground, yeah, like the text or the borders or the lines, and background color literally just sets the color of the background that doesn't have, you know, the parts of the page that don't have any elements on it. So now that we've applied that styling, if we save this, we should have the default theme of dark. So it's compiling, compile successful, sweet, and so look at that. Now we've got dark theme applied. So you can see that the background is darker, but the text in the border is now white, just like what is defined in our dark theme. So we've got foreground as white and background as almost black, not quite black. Okay, but so if you remember before when I was talking about theme consumer, if there is no if there's no context provider, then the consumer will just default to the the default value, which in our case we've defined as theme.dark. So now what we need to do is we need to add the provider. So if we scroll down here, we can see that we are still adding the provider inside this div here. Again, I apologize for the readme. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that. So this goes just above the theme context.consumer. So we are just going to slot it in just up here. Awesome. So I'm going to slot that there. And then we need to slot the ending div here. Awesome. So now we're going to save that. Awesome. Now we've still got no change. We've still got no way of changing the theme. However, now the consumer will be pulling the value from the provider. It just so happens that we can't change the theme at the moment because we haven't given an option to do that. But now that should be working as we require it. So finally, you would have seen at the start of the tutorial that I had a little button for changing the theme, and we're just going to add that in. So we're just going to add this at the, just after the consumer. So we add this in here. That doesn't look pretty. There we go. Why is that not happy? Cannot find button. Okay. That means that we need to define it. So let's just import button from at material UI core. Awesome. Scroll down. That should be happy. Hopefully we'll compile, and we have compiled. And so you'll see that on click, we have it as this.toggle theme. So it's going to go through and run that this.toggle theme method that we defined up above. So we have that button there. And now, if we look here, here's our button. And if we click that, we'll see that we can now switch between light and dark theme. So it is important to note that this tutorial that we've just gone through is a very, very, very simplistic view of Context API, and it's literally showing you the bare bones. So generally with Context API, you wouldn't use it on an application this simple. You'll generally use it when there are many components involved. But because we've decided to keep things simple with our web app, and we still wanted to show off what Context API can do, we've just implemented in this. But you're not, in an application like this, the concept of prop drilling that I briefly talked about at the start is not a big issue. So generally you don't add Context API or a state management system to a website like this just because it's so simple. But the idea of this is just to show you how Context API can work. So you can have it so that context provider is here, and then theme context.consumer is nested inside another component. So you can do that. But yeah, for the purposes of this tutorial, I've just decided to keep it simple and just keep everything in the same file. But feel free to explore how you can further use Context API. It is an important skill to have because it can be nowhere in the workforce will you be working on an application this simple. You will definitely have to have a lot more components and a lot more pages, and so the concept of prop drilling will become more apparent when you have all those components. You'll be like, oh, but this doesn't need that, and so Context API will come in handy, and any state management will come in handy when you get to that level. But anyway, hopefully you learned something new, and yeah, thank you for listening. Bye.